Hello, fellow Earthlings, and this is Earthling 6455463728. And yeah, you probably shouldn't watch the news. Not too often, anyway. I remember a while ago, I feel like I'm bringing up my ex girlfriend too often, but a while ago, I think I felt a little bit overwhelmed or worried or concerned about the way that the world was, perhaps. And maybe I mentioned it to my then girlfriend at the time. And her response was, maybe you should just stop watching the news. And, a little bit of me was like, that's stupid. I have to watch the news. Because maybe you feel like that. Maybe you feel that it's your obligation to at least follow the news, to know what's current. But I would suggest that maybe it isn't. I don't, it's not really your job to keep abreast of the most concerning things in the world beyond your life. Uh, for one thing, the news is not actually representative of the things that you need to be concerned about. I mean, the news really is a grouping of the most interesting things that have happened uh, and can be presented for you that will entice you to watch the news and watch the ads. That's what it is. I mean, there are a lot of important things that may happen in a day, but they might not be that interesting. And you might get bored and you might decide that you don't want to watch them. That is not in the interest of the newscasters. What's in the interest of the newscasters is to have you watch the news. Just like it's in the interest of anybody with a movie or TV show to bend and twist that TV show to suit you or to engender your interests. Even the angles that they take of a news story have to be based on things that will get the most number of people to watch. And they always have to make it seem as if there is a time deadline, some sort of a crisis, something that's happening now that you have to watch. And you don't. And furthermore, feeling this constant, never ending sequence of crises coming one after the other, it isn't good for you, especially when it's not true. Think of how many different breaking news events you've seen in your life, or how many this just in, or this crisis, or this other crisis that you've been through. And, or for example, I remember there could be as many as 59 different people dying. You ever notice that as many as, it usually is nowhere near that number that they suppose it could be as bad as. Because why would they give you a realistic estimate? They need to hear how bad it possibly could be. Think about this. If your checkup was a news story, I think every single time you went to the doctor for this checkup, the news story would be something like, you could have cancer, or you could have, what's something that could kill you right away? You could have heart disease. You could have. That's what, makes that checkup interesting. Otherwise, it's just a checkup. And who wants to hear about your boring checkup? So just, let's say driving to work. If your driving to work was a news story, it would have to list how many accidents there had been on that particular road. You're not thinking about trying to get into an accident, but nobody wants to hear about your boring commute. So they have to hear about the things that could make it interesting, beyond interesting, exciting, life or death. So they have to hear about how many accidents and how many people have died, and whichever one is higher, that's the one that they'll go with. I realized that when I took my ex-girlfriend's advice, um, she was right. I felt so relieved not to be seeing about this robbery and that assault and this rape and that murder that happened to one or two in a million people. This isn't to say that one shouldn't be concerned or aware of where one is. No, you should be concerned. You should be aware of the dangers. You probably shouldn't be aware of the probabilities of the dangers, because then you would probably not bother to do anything. And it's really easy to become a victim, because I think that in some circumstances, your chance of being that person increases enormously when you're not even thinking about it. So, for example, if you, on any given day, when you are traveling, you're probably not very likely to be robbed or assaulted or anything like that. But that one day when you are really, 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 really late and you're walking home alone and there's nobody around, absolutely, I think your chances of, being victimized go up to a really, really high level at that point, at that specific instant. And you should be aware. But most times, you don't need to be. And I think that, for our everyday health and well-being, most of us don't need to know what's going on. And by what's going on, this is the thing. What's going on is really, really boring 9 times out of 10. I mean, it's not really, as I mentioned, the news isn't about what's going on. It's about what gets your attention. So, let's say, it's a Tuesday. What's going on is a whole bunch of people went to work, a whole bunch of people came home, and one person had a problem. Maybe they had a car accident and it was really bad and it backed up traffic. You're not going to hear about each one of those boring people and their boring commutes to work that was completely uneventful. But that is what's going on. You're just going to hear back to back to back every single day about the worst thing that happened. And that isn't good for anybody. It is not good for anybody to constantly be thinking of the worst thing that can happen in every single situation and scenario that they might find themselves in all the time. I can't imagine that is helpful or healthy to anybody. And it skews in many ways, in many sick ways, honestly. The news can skew our opinion of who is dangerous. For example, women seem to be, especially these days, seem to be perpetually afraid of their own shadows. And that might be from watching too much news. I mean, and this is probably a video that, I should do later on. We are more in danger of being hurt by the people that we see every day. The more often you see somebody, the more likely you're probably going to get hurt by that person. You might get emotionally hurt, you might get physically hurt, you might get financially hurt, they might lie to you. That's really the fact of the matter. But today, these days, we are all, and I guess it's beyond these days because people are afraid of what they don't know. So we're afraid of that stranger who's going to do X or Y or Z. And we're not aware that that stranger has there are very, very few strangers that we frequently come into contact with. And of course, if they frequently come into contact with us, then they're probably not really classified as a stranger. But if somebody has, I always break it down to this: means, motive, and opportunity. Do you have a motive? It's like those movies that you see or TV shows where the detective asks for, checks for a means, motive, and opportunity. The people who have a motive to do something to you for a particular reason know enough about you so that they have a motive. They might know what money you have, where you have it, how much of it you have. Uh, they know enough about you to have a motive. If you don't know someone, it's kind of hard, or it's, to me, less likely that you'd have a motive to do something to them. As for the opportunity, again, it's a similar thing. If you don't cross paths with someone that much, it's going to be hard to have an opportunity to do what you have a motive to do. And in terms of the means, well, maybe that's just, to my mind, the means kind of uh, overlaps with the opportunities that you have, because you're going to have a specific opportunity to do something. And the means are going to have to change depending on what opportunities the person has. So, and again, you know that someone has a bunch of money. You have an opportunity to stick them up, I suppose. But depending on where you cross paths or something like that, it really does, again, to me, come down to the people that you cross paths with regularly. But the news doesn't suggest that. The news suggests that stranger that you haven't seen who is walking around in the neighborhood, and they're gonna come and rape you. They're gonna come and hold you up. They're gonna come and do this or that or the other. When they don't have much of, a motive, because do they know you? Do they know anything that you have? I mean, I don't want to suggest anything crazy, but do they know that you really are as attractive as you look? Maybe you're not. Maybe from a distance you look attractive, and they're like, oh yeah, I want that person. I'm going to kidnap them. And then they come closer and they're like, oh, I made a mistake. I kind of saw them from far away. And anyway, before I go overboard, guys, you can like, unlike, comment, subscribe, and/or share. So wish me lucks. And one thing, if you don't like it, or even if you do like it, maybe you could give a comment as to why, because I think that's probably good feedback that I could respond to. Maybe something that I didn't make very clear. Um, I just think that that's probably a better use of your time than to just throw out a feeling. Anyway, thanks. Peace.